Ladies and gentlemen, finally I've gone a little bit green on my Intel position. This is after starting the position back in 2022 when it was somewhere in the 40s and averaging on the way down using cash secured puts. Now, in the last few days, it has jumped to nearly 13%. Part of this enthusiasm for Intel is based on NVIDIA giving a little bit of a nod to the quality of Intel's chips, which, that always helps because NVIDIA's star seems to be on the rise, at least in the short run. It seems to be a darling with investors lately. I think it's because they said AI, and AI seems to be the magic word in Wall Street right now. Another thing I found was it looks like maybe Intel has won a little victory against this patent troll. Basically, it was found that they had a low quality patent, and it reverses at least part of a decision that was made against Intel based on some kind of infringement back in 2021. So if that's the case, it looks like that could be saving Intel about $1.5 billion unless that gets appealed and reversed yet again in the favor of VLSI technology, which is categorized in this article as a patent holding company, which makes me suspect that maybe it's like a patent troll of some kind. But it's no secret that Intel had a pretty rough year in 2022. Okay, revenue took a 20% hit, and net income and free cash flow equally took some really bad hits. Okay, now coming off of that, it would be easy to say, wow, it was a mistake to get into Intel in early 2022 because this stuff took a hit, the share price took a hit, we're taking hits left and right. However, I think if you, from the beginning, factored in the capital expenditures that Intel was about to start taking on, and two, that there was a big surge in the PC market during the pandemic, you should have anticipated some softness in the numbers, right? And factored that into your valuation to a certain extent. Now, even factoring all of that in, you can make certain assumptions, conservative assumptions, to come up with a reasonable price for Intel. Now, the numbers that I would use today would be making the assumption that we're past the capex and that we're starting to regain some of the free cash flow that we had before the capex made it take a huge dump. Okay, so historically they've been able to achieve close to $5 per share in free cash flow, but they've had years that were negative recently because of the capex, but another year right after almost $5 per share they had $2.23. I'm kind of splitting the difference and saying, hey, once the capex is over, it'll be somewhere in the middle between those two numbers, and we'll call it $3 per share of free cash flow. Okay, and that's a very provisional number. It wasn't reached super scientifically. I just think that's a reasonable starting point for Intel once the capex comes back down to a more sustainable level for them. Okay. Now, I've also factored in their tangible book value because they do have an excellent balance sheet, and I think that their fair value deserves some credit for that. We have left in a mid-single-digit growth rate for Intel, which, by the way, with the way the chip market is potentially anticipated to grow over the long run, that might even be beating them up too much, right? Even if other companies get more of the growth, to say that Intel will only grow low to mid single digits, honestly, that's not giving them a whole heck of a lot of credit for what's going to happen with their foundry business and, potentially Mobileye and some of the other things they've got going on. So, conservative assumptions. And we've put in a discount rate of 12.5%. Now, the long-term return in the overall market for the last 40 years in the S&P 500 has been about 10. So again, we're demanding that we get a return that's 25% better than the market return. And using those numbers, you come up with a fair valuation of mid 40s. So not too much different from the price where I started selling puts back in 2022. So the numbers I may have used, the exact numbers back then in whatever pricing model I was using, may have been a little different, okay? Your assumptions, if you rerun the numbers every 3-6 months, every year, whatever it is, probably aren't going to be identical. But the fact is, we're still coming up with a number that says that our investment, even back then, probably made some logical sense based on where we think the business is heading. And the fact of the matter is that the poor numbers in 2022 aren't going to be reflective of the long term for the business. They are, if anything, the outlier. And this is because of, one, coming down from all-time highs in the computer sales from the pandemic, and two, the sharp increase in capital expenditures, the reinvesting back into the business. Those two things converging at the same time caused just some horrendous things to happen to their numbers in 2022. But that's been far from the normal thing for Intel. Before that, it was pretty much steady as she goes, modest growth before then, okay? Now, they've taken their hits. Things have not, by any means, fully turned the corner yet for them, but there are a lot of good signs that they are executing on the things that they've, said that they're going to execute on. And so I think it's pretty reasonable to say that they'll get back to having positive free cash flow and that they'll be able to build it back up at a very modest growth rate over the coming years with everything that they've invested back into the company. I think that's going to pay at least some kind of return on their investment. That's just my opinion, though, but I think that it's based on some really sound reasoning. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is where Intel stands today. I still think, if I wasn't in Intel already, I would still probably consider it to be a buy today. My position is pretty well sized for the size of my portfolio, so I'm not aggressively trying to add more at this level. We're finally in the green on our Intel, so that's nice to see. However, if it were to sharply drop again in the short run, I might sell some more puts and maybe try to add a little bit more. But for now, I'm happy with my hold, and I look forward to seeing how they execute in the future going forward. Now, if you have Intel stock, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below or on our Discord, which I'll link in the description. Take it easy, everyone, and have a wonderful hump day. Cheers.